The scorching sun hung like a fiery medallion in the Arizona sky the day Hazel Josephs was dragged from her small homestead and thrown before the town of Jerome Junction. Her wrists were bound with coarse rope, her honey-brown hair falling in tangled waves around a face streaked with dust and tears. The year was 1883, and in the unforgiving territory of Arizona, accusations of well poisoning were tantamount to murder. "This woman has brought death to our town," Mayor Abernathy bellowed, his voice carrying across the crowd of angry faces. 3 children sick, livestock dying, and who lives closest to our well? Who was seen there after midnight 2 nights ago? Hazel trembled but kept her chin high. At 26, she had weathered the death of her parents, the journey west from Pennsylvania, and the disappointment of a homestead claim that yielded more rocks than crops. But nothing had prepared her for this. "I did no such thing," she said, her voice steadier than her hands. "I went to the well for water, same as everyone, nothing more." From the back of the crowd, a tall figure pushed forward. Unfamiliar to most, he moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to hard country. Dust coated his worn leather boots and the hem of his long duster. The stranger's hat shadowed his features, but when he lifted his head, piercing blue eyes surveyed the scene with calm assessment. "Folks seem mighty quick to judgment here," the man said, his deep voice silencing the murmurs of the crowd. "Where I come from, we believe in proof before punishment." Mayor Abernathy squared his shoulders. "And who might you be, stranger?" "Brent Riley," the man replied, removing his hat to reveal sun-streaked brown hair. "Just rode in from Tucson. Thought Jerome Junction might be a place where reason prevails." His gaze fell on Hazel, lingering on her dirt-smudged face. "Apparently I was mistaken." Sheriff Thomas adjusted the pistol on his hip. "This ain't your business, Riley. We handle our own troubles here." Brent stepped closer to the well that stood in the center of town. "If you're so certain this lady poisoned your water, you won't mind if I sample it myself." A hush fell over the crowd. The sheriff and mayor exchanged glances. "Be my guest," Abernathy finally said with a dismissive wave. "But don't come crying when you're doubled over with sickness by sundown." With deliberate movements, Brent worked the well's handle, drawing up a bucket of clear water. He held it up, examining it in the sunlight, then dipped a tin cup into the liquid. The townspeople watched, transfixed, as he raised the cup to his lips and drank deeply. He filled the cup again and drained it without hesitation. "Tastes like water to me," he said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Good water, in fact. Give it time," someone called from the crowd. "The poison works slow." Brent shook his head. "I've seen poison water before. Worked 2 years with the cavalry tracking raiders who fouled wells. This water's clean as a mountain stream." He walked over to Hazel, his gaze never leaving her face. "This woman is blameless." "You can't know that," the mayor protested. "Actually, I can," Brent replied. He reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a small leather case. Opening it, he revealed several glass vials and delicate instruments. "Before I rode with the cavalry, I studied with a chemist in San Francisco, learned how to test for common poisons." His eyes hardened. "So, unless you want me to prove your accusations false in front of everyone, I suggest you untie this lady and start looking for the real cause of your troubles." The sheriff hesitated, then stepped forward with a knife to cut Hazel's bonds. As the rope fell away, she rubbed her chafed wrists, her eyes rising to meet Brent's. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet," he replied quietly. "Something's still making those children sick, and until we find out what, you're not safe." The mayor wasn't ready to concede. "She still could have. I'll tell you what," Brent interrupted. "I'll stay in town a few days, check your well properly, talk to the families with sick children. If this lady had anything to do with it, I'll help you prove it. If not, you owe her an apology." The crowd began to disperse, their bloodlust temporarily quenched by the promise of a thorough investigation. As the sheriff led Hazel away not to the jail, but to the boarding house where she could rest, Brent caught her elbow. "Miss Josephs, isn't it?" he asked. She nodded, surprised. "How did you heard the mayor say it? Listen, I meant what I said about the water being clean, but something's wrong in this town and you're an easy target. Be careful." Hazel studied him, trying to discern his motives. Why would you help a stranger? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Maybe I have a weakness for lost causes. Or maybe I just can't stand seeing a mob ready to hang someone without proof." He tipped his hat. "Get some rest. I'll come find you tomorrow." As Hazel watched him stride toward the saloon, she felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. But mingled with that hope was fear. Someone in Jerome Junction wanted her blamed for the illness spreading through town. And if it wasn't the well water causing it, the real culprit was still at large. The following morning, Brent knocked on Hazel's door at the boarding house. She had spent the night tossing and turning, half expecting to hear another angry mob coming for her. When she opened the door, dark circles shadowed her eyes, but she had washed the dirt from her face and pinned her hair neatly beneath a simple bonnet. "Mr. Riley," she said with a nod. "You actually came." "Said I would, didn't I?" He held up a small basket. "Brought breakfast. Figured you might not want to face the dining room just yet." She opened the door wider to admit him, conscious of the impropriety but too grateful for his kindness to turn him away. The room was sparse but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single wooden chair. "Not much seating," she apologized. "I've eaten in worse conditions," Brent replied, setting the basket on the bed. "Once had to balance my plate on my knees while sitting on a rattlesnake den. Didn't realize it till morning." He unpacked fresh bread, cheese, and 2 apples. "Hope you're hungry." Despite everything, Hazel smiled. "Starving, actually." As they ate, Brent explained his plan. "I want to talk to the families with sick children first, then I'll check the livestock that died. After that, we should look at your homestead. If someone's trying to frame you, there might be evidence there." Hazel nodded, her face solemn. "The Wilkins lost a cow 2 days ago, and their youngest boy, Timothy, has been fevered for 3 days. The Parkers' little girl is sick too." Any other connection between the families, she thought for a moment. They both have children who attend the schoolhouse. And she hesitated. They both opposed Mayor Abernathy's plan to sell water rights to the mining company. Brent's eyes sharpened. "Water rights?" "Yes. There's a silver mining operation wanting to expand closer to town. They need water for their operations. The mayor's been pushing to sell them access to our creek, the one that feeds the town well." She twisted a napkin in her lap. "Some folks are against it, afraid it will leave us short during dry seasons." "And where do you stand on this?" "I spoke against it at the town meeting last week," she admitted. "My homestead is downstream. If the mining operation pollutes the water or uses too much." She shrugged. "I'd lose everything." Brent leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "So you, the Wilkins, and the Parkers all oppose the mayor's plan, and now the Wilkins and Parkers have sick children and you're being accused of poisoning the well." He shook his head. "That's quite a coincidence." "You think the mayor is behind this?" Hazel asked, incredulous. "I'm not accusing anyone yet," Brent replied, "but it's a thread worth pulling." He stood, gathering the remains of their breakfast. "Let's go see the Wilkins family first." The Wilkins lived in a modest frame house at the edge of town. Sarah Wilkins, a worn woman in her 30s, answered the door with a crying infant on her hip and suspicion in her eyes. "Mrs. Wilkins," Brent said, removing his hat. "I'm Brent Riley. This is Miss Josephs." I understand your boy Timothy is ill. I'd like to ask you a few questions if I may. Sarah's gaze hardened when she saw Hazel. You've got nerve showing up here after what you've done. Sarah, Hazel pleaded, I didn't poison anyone or anything. Mr. Riley is helping me prove it. Brent stepped forward. Madam, I tested the well water yesterday. It's clean. But something is making your boy sick and we aim to find out what. May we come in? After a moment's hesitation, Sarah stepped back, allowing them entry. The house was neat but showed signs of strain, unwashed dishes stacked by the basin, laundry piled in a corner. In a small bedroom, Timothy Wilkins lay on a narrow bed, his face flushed with fever. When did he first show symptoms? Brent asked, kneeling beside the bed. 3 days ago, Sarah replied, bouncing the fussy infant. Started with a headache, then fever and stomach pains. Dr. Bishop says it might be typhoid, but he's not certain. Brent gently felt the boy's forehead. Has he been drinking water from the well? Of course. We all have. Her eyes narrowed. That's why we thought if it was the well, everyone in town would be sick, Brent interrupted. What about food? Has he eaten anything unusual? Sarah shook her head. Same as the rest of us. Bread, beans, bit of bacon. We had apples from the Greer's orchard last week. And your cow that died? Brent asked. Was it drinking from the same water source? Yes, from the trough we fill from the well. Brent stood, his expression troubled. Mrs. Wilkins, with your permission, I'd like to examine your cow and take a look at your well bucket. Outside, they found the cow's carcass in a field behind the barn. Brent circled it carefully, examining the bloated body with a professional eye. No obvious signs of poisoning, he muttered. No foaming at the mouth, no unusual discoloration. He crouched down, studying the ground around the animal. But look here. Hazel leaned closer. Scattered on the ground were small green leaves and stems. What is that? She asked. Looks like water hemlock, Brent replied grimly. Highly toxic, causes seizures, abdominal pain, death in livestock. Similar symptoms in humans, though less severe if the exposure is limited. He picked up one of the leaves with a handkerchief. It doesn't grow naturally around here. Someone put this here deliberately. Sarah Wilkins, who had followed them outside, gasped. Are you saying someone poisoned our cow on purpose? And my Timothy too? Brent straightened. I'm saying it's possible. May I see your well bucket now? The bucket hung beside the kitchen door. Brent examined it carefully, running his fingers along the rim. There, he said softly, showing Hazel a faint greenish residue. Hemlock again. Someone contaminated your bucket, Mrs. Wilkins, not the town well. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. But who would do such a thing? That's what we intend to find out, Brent promised. In the meantime, don't use this bucket. And if Timothy gets worse, send for me immediately. Their visit to the Parker family revealed a similar situation: a sick child, a contaminated bucket, and parents who had opposed the mayor's water rights plan. By mid-afternoon, Brent and Hazel had established a pattern that pointed to deliberate targeting. It's not just random illness, Hazel said as they walked toward her homestead on the outskirts of town. Someone is poisoning specific families and trying to blame me. Question is, why frame you specifically? Brent asked. You opposed the water rights plan same as the others. Why not just poison you too? Hazel walked in silence for a moment. My land, she finally said. My homestead sits on the creek that feeds the town well. If I were convicted of poisoning the water, I'd lose my claim. The land would revert to territorial control, and could then be sold to the highest bidder, Brent finished, like a mining company. They crested a small hill, and Hazel's homestead came into view: a simple cabin with a vegetable garden, a small corral, and a chicken coop. Beyond it flowed a clear creek, its banks lined with cottonwoods. It's not much, she said, but it's mine. My father died getting me here. Said the West would give us a fresh start. She smiled sadly. He didn't count on the drought or the rocky soil or the isolation. You've done well, Brent observed, taking in the neat garden and the smoke-tight cabin. Many would have given up by now. I'm not one for giving up, she replied. Though yesterday, when they had that rope around my wrists, I thought it might be the end. Brent's eyes met hers. It wasn't, and it won't be. They searched her property thoroughly but found nothing suspicious until they reached the creek. There, partially hidden under the bank, was a small burlap sack containing dried hemlock leaves. Planted evidence, Brent said, carefully lifting the sack. Someone wanted this found when the sheriff inevitably searched your place. Hazel's face paled. They really were going to hang me. Not if I can help it, Brent replied, his voice hardening. Come on. We need to take this to Sheriff Thomas. The sheriff's office was empty when they arrived, but they found Thomas at the saloon, playing cards with several townsmen. His expression darkened when he saw Hazel. Thought I told you to stay out of sight, Miss Josephs, he said gruffly. Brent stepped forward, placing the burlap sack on the table. Sheriff, we found evidence that someone is deliberately poisoning residents of Jerome Junction and trying to frame Miss Josephs for it. He explained their findings at the Wilkins and Parker homes, showing the sheriff the hemlock leaves and describing the plant's toxic effects. So you're saying someone's going around contaminating water buckets with this plant? Thomas asked skeptically. Yes. And they planted more of it on Miss Joseph's property to implicate her. Brent leaned forward. Sheriff, I believe this is connected to the water rights dispute. The families targeted all opposed selling rights to the mining company. Sheriff Thomas's gaze shifted uncomfortably. That's a serious accusation, Riley. The mayor won't take kindly to implications he's involved in poisoning. I didn't mention the mayor, Brent replied evenly. Interesting that your mind went there first. A tense silence fell over the saloon. Finally, the sheriff stood, adjusting his gun belt. I'll look into it. But in the meantime, Miss Joseph stays under town supervision. For her own safety, you understand. Brent's hand drifted toward his own weapon. She stays with me. I'll guarantee her safety and her appearance if charges are ever formally brought. After a long moment, Thomas nodded. On your head be it, Riley, but don't leave town. As they exited the saloon, Hazel exhaled shakily. He's part of it, isn't he? Maybe, Brent replied. Or maybe he's just a man who doesn't want to cross the town's leadership. Either way, we need to be careful. He glanced at the darkening sky. It's getting late. Let's get a room at the boarding house and continue our investigation tomorrow. Mrs. Finch, the boarding house proprietor, raised her eyebrows when Brent requested 2 rooms, but said nothing as she handed over the keys. After a simple supper eaten in uncomfortable silence under the stares of the other boarders, Hazel retreated to her room. Brent remained downstairs, nursing a whiskey and keeping an ear open for town gossip. He didn't have to wait long. Shortly after 9 o'clock, Mayor Abernathy entered with 2 men Brent hadn't seen before, well-dressed city types with the unmistakable air of business about them. Gentlemen, I assure you, the unfortunate incidents with the sick children will not affect our arrangement, the mayor was saying as they settled at a corner table. The town council votes tomorrow, and I have the votes secured. They'd better be, Abernathy, the older of the 2 men replied. Silver Crown Mining has invested considerably in preliminary work already. We can't afford delays. There won't be any, the mayor promised. By this time tomorrow, you'll have full rights to the creek water, enough to expand operations as planned. Brent sipped his whiskey, keeping his head down but his ears open. The conversation continued, touching on technical details of water diversion and estimated silver yields. Then the younger businessman lowered his voice. What about the opposition? I understand several landowners were quite vocal at your town meeting." The mayor's laugh held no humor. "They're being handled. The most troublesome is that Joseph's woman with her homestead claim, but she'll be gone soon enough." "How can you be so sure?" Abernathy smiled thinly. "Let's just say circumstances are aligning against her. After tomorrow's vote, it won't matter anyway." Brent had heard enough. He finished his drink and quietly made his way upstairs, his mind racing. At Hazel's door, he knocked softly. She answered immediately, still fully dressed. "I couldn't sleep," she explained. "Every time I close my eyes, I see that mob coming for me again." Brent entered, closing the door behind him. "We've got trouble," he said in a low voice, and related what he had overheard. Hazel sank onto the bed, her face pale. "So the mayor is behind it. He's poisoning his own townspeople children just to get my land. And to silence opposition to the water rights sale," Brent added. "The vote is tomorrow. We need proof before then, or at least enough doubt to stall the vote." "But how? We know he's responsible, but we can't prove it." Brent paced the small room. "Someone had to acquire that hemlock. It doesn't grow naturally here. Someone had to plant it on your property and contaminate those water buckets." He stopped suddenly. "The mayor wouldn't dirty his hands. He'd have someone do it for him." "But who?" Hazel asked. "Someone who stands to benefit. Someone close to the mayor." Brent snapped his fingers. "Did you notice the mayor's assistant? Young man, wears spectacles, follows Abernathy everywhere." "Edwin Gable," Hazel supplied. "He's new in town, came about 6 months ago. Claims to be from back east somewhere. He was at the well accusation yesterday, standing right behind the mayor. And I saw him at both the Wilkins and Parker homes earlier this week, according to Mrs. Wilkins. Said he was delivering messages from the mayor." Hazel's eyes widened. "Messages? Or poison?" "Exactly what I was thinking," Brent replied. "We need to find Gable's quarters. If he has hemlock or evidence of handling it, we can take it to the sheriff." "Even if the sheriff is involved," Brent's expression hardened. "Sheriff Thomas may be turning a blind eye to the mayor's schemes, but if we present him with clear evidence of attempted murder, he'll have to act. No lawman wants that on his conscience." They waited until the house was quiet, then slipped out. The night was cool, stars glittering in a velvet sky as they made their way through the sleeping town. Edwin Gable rented a room above the Mercantile, accessible by an exterior staircase. "Keep watch," Brent whispered as they reached the stairs. "If you see anyone coming, whistle once." Hazel nodded, her heart pounding as Brent ascended silently to Gable's door. She watched him work the lock with something from his pocket, the door swinging open moments later. As Brent disappeared inside, Hazel positioned herself in the shadows at the bottom of the stairs, every sense alert. Minutes ticked by. A cat prowled past, making her jump. From somewhere in town, she heard the distant piano notes of the saloon. Just as she was beginning to worry, Brent emerged, clutching something in his hand. "Found it," he said triumphantly when he reached her. "Hemlock leaves, the same type used on the Wilkins and Parker families. And this." He held up a letter. "Instructions from Silver Crown Mining to Mayor Abernathy, detailing removal of obstacles to the water rights acquisition. Specifically mentions your homestead as the primary concern." Hazel stared at the evidence. "We need to show this to Sheriff Thomas immediately." "Not tonight," Brent replied. "We'll go at first light when there are witnesses. I don't trust the sheriff alone with this evidence." They returned to the boarding house, relief mingling with tension. The next morning, they rose early and headed straight for the sheriff's office. To their surprise, a crowd had already gathered in the town square. At its center stood Mayor Abernathy, Edwin Gable, and the 2 businessmen from Silver Crown Mining. "What's happening?" Hazel asked a woman at the edge of the crowd. "Emergency town council meeting," the woman replied. Mayor called it at dawn. They're voting on the water rights sale right now instead of this afternoon as planned. Brent cursed under his breath. They must have realized we were onto them. Come on. They pushed through the crowd just as Abernathy was calling for a vote. All in favor of granting Silver Crown Mining Company exclusive rights to the Juniper Creek watershed, say aye. Stop. Brent's voice rang out across the square. Heads turned, conversations hushed. This vote cannot proceed. We have evidence of criminal activity by Mayor Abernathy and his assistant, Edwin Gable. Abernathy's face reddened. This is outrageous. Sheriff, remove this man. Sheriff Thomas stepped forward uncertainly, hand on his pistol. Riley, this isn't the time or place. It's exactly the time and place, Brent interrupted, holding up the hemlock leaves and the letter. Mayor Abernathy and Edwin Gable have been poisoning townspeople to eliminate opposition to this water sale. They've contaminated private water supplies with water hemlock, causing illness in children and death in livestock. And they tried to frame Miss Josephs for poisoning the town well so they could seize her homestead, which controls critical access to Juniper Creek. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. One of the council members, a graying man with a serious expression, stepped forward. Those are serious accusations, Mr. Riley. What proof do you have? Brent handed him the evidence. These hemlock leaves were found in Edwin Gable's room. They match those planted on Miss Joseph's property and used to contaminate the Wilkins and Parker family water supplies. And this letter explicitly discusses removing obstacles to acquiring water rights, with specific mention of Miss Joseph's homestead. The councilman read the letter, his expression darkening. Mayor, what do you have to say about this? Abernathy's confident demeanor faltered. It's obviously fabricated. This drifter and that woman are conspiring to block progress in our town. Silver Crown Mining will bring prosperity to Jerome Junction. At what cost? Hazel stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. The lives of our children, the health of our families. Mr. Riley tested the town well yesterday and proved it wasn't poisoned. Yet the mayor was eager to hang me without evidence. From the back of the crowd, Sarah Wilkins pushed forward, Timothy wrapped in a blanket in her arms. My boy nearly died, she said, her voice shaking with anger. And our cow did die. If what Mr. Riley says is true, then the mayor poisoned my family to silence our opposition to this water sale. Edwin Gable, who had remained silent, suddenly bolted. He didn't get far. Two ranchers tackled him before he reached the edge of the square. His desperate flight was damning evidence in itself. Sheriff Thomas finally moved decisively, taking the evidence from the councilman. Mayor Abernathy, Edwin Gable, you're both under arrest on suspicion of attempted murder, livestock poisoning, and conspiracy. He turned to the Silver Crown representatives, who were edging away. You gentlemen might want to stick around too. I have some questions about this letter. As the sheriff led the prisoners away, the crowd erupted in conversation. The council chairman called for order, announcing the water rights vote would be postponed indefinitely pending a full investigation. Gradually, the crowd dispersed, many stopping to apologize to Hazel for their rush to judgment. When the square had emptied, Hazel turned to Brent, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Thank you. I don't know what would have happened without you. Brent smiled, a real smile that warmed his blue eyes. You'd have figured something out. You're not one for giving up, remember? She laughed softly. True, but I'm glad I didn't have to face this alone. She hesitated, then added, will you be moving on now that the mystery is solved? The question hung between them, weighted with more meaning than its simple words suggested. Brent looked toward the distant mountains, then back at Hazel. That depends, he said carefully. Jerome Junction hasn't made the best first impression, but it has some attractions that might be worth staying for. A blush colored Hazel's cheeks. My homestead needs a lot of work. The south fence is falling down, and I've been meaning to expand the garden. Sounds like you could use an extra pair of hands, Brent replied, his tone casual but his eyes intent on hers. I could, she agreed softly, if they belong to someone planning to stay a while. Might be I could settle for a time, see how things develop. He offered her his arm. Perhaps you could show me that fence that needs fixing. Hazel took his arm, warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the Arizona sun. I'd like that very much, Mr. Riley. As they walked toward her homestead, the town of Jerome Junction fell away behind them, its recent darkness eclipsed by the promise of a new beginning. In the weeks that followed, the truth about Mayor Abernathy's scheme unfolded fully. Edwin Gable confessed, hoping for leniency, and revealed that Abernathy had promised him a position with Silver Crown Mining once the water rights were secured. The mining company denied knowledge of the poisonings but couldn't explain away the incriminating letter. All three men were bound over for trial in Prescott. Meanwhile, Brent moved into Hazel's barn, fixing the south fence by day and joining her for supper each evening. The town, chastened by its rush to judgment, made amends. The new acting mayor, former councilman Harold Dawson, formally apologized to Hazel at the next town meeting and promised reforms in how accusations would be handled in the future. As summer stretched into fall, Brent and Hazel settled into a comfortable rhythm. He helped expand her garden and built an irrigation channel from the creek that increased her yield threefold. She taught him about the native plants and how to predict weather from the behavior of animals. Together, they nursed Timothy Wilkins back to full health. Brent's knowledge of chemistry and Hazel's skill with herbal remedies proving a powerful combination. They were harvesting squash on a golden October afternoon when Brent finally spoke of his past. I wasn't completely honest when we met, he began, straightening from the garden row. I did study chemistry in San Francisco, and I did ride with the cavalry for a time, but I left out why I was passing through Jerome Junction that day. Hazel set down her basket, giving him her full attention. I figured you had your reasons. My brother was killed 2 years ago, Brent said, his voice low. He was a geologist for a mining company in Colorado, found evidence they were dumping toxic materials into the watershed and reported it to the territorial authorities. 3 days later, he was found dead supposedly in a mining accident. Hazel's hand went to her mouth. That's terrible. I'm so sorry. The company was Silver Crown Mining, Brent continued. I've been tracking their operations across the territories, gathering evidence of their practices. When I heard they were moving into Arizona, I followed. I didn't expect to find them poisoning townsfolk to secure water rights, but it fits their pattern. So when you defended me that day, I wasn't just passing through. I was already suspicious of Silver Crown's involvement here. He met her eyes. But that doesn't mean I wasn't sincere. I couldn't stand by and watch an innocent person condemned without evidence, regardless of my other motives. Hazel considered this revelation. And now that Silver Crown is being investigated, will you move on to track them elsewhere? Brent stepped closer, taking her soil-stained hands in his. That was my plan when I arrived, but plans change, people change. His thumbs traced circles on her palms. I've found something here I didn't expect to find. What's that? She asked, though her racing heart already knew the answer. A reason to stop wandering, a place that could be home. He hesitated. If I'm welcome to stay. Hazel squeezed his hands. You've been welcome since the day you drank from that well and declared me blameless. Their first kiss tasted of sunshine and promise, of endings and beginnings intertwined. When they finally broke apart, Brent rested his forehead against hers. "I should probably stop sleeping in your barn," he said, a smile in his voice. "People will talk. People already talk," she replied. "But you're right, it isn't proper." She took a deep breath. "Unless you were my husband." Brent pulled back slightly to see her face. "Hazel Josephs, are you proposing to me?" She laughed, the sound bright in the autumn air. "I suppose I am. Scandalous, isn't it?" "Completely improper," he agreed, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I should say no on principle." His expression softened. "But I've never been one for convention. Yes, Hazel, I would be honored to be your husband." They married 2 weeks later in the small church at the edge of town. The whole of Jerome Junction attended, partly from genuine goodwill, partly from curiosity about the couple who had exposed corruption in their midst. Sarah Wilkins baked the wedding cake. Timothy, fully recovered, served as ring bearer. Sheriff Thomas, seeking to make amends, gave the bride away. As Hazel and Brent spoke their vows, sunlight streamed through the simple stained glass windows, painting them in patterns of gold and blue. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Brent kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to the eyes of even the most stoic ranchers present. The celebration afterward lasted well into the evening. As lanterns were lit and music played in the town square, Brent led Hazel away from the crowd. "Happy, Mrs. Riley?" he asked, his arm around her waist. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she replied, leaning into him. "When my father brought me west, he promised me a new life. I think this is what he meant, not just survival, but joy." "Your father would be proud of you," Brent said softly. "You fought for your land. You stood your ground when the whole town turned against you." "We fought together," she corrected him. "And now we'll build together." Their homestead flourished over the following year. With Brent's chemistry knowledge and Hazel's farming skills, they developed irrigation methods that allowed them to grow crops other homesteaders couldn't. They built a proper barn and added a room to the cabin. Brent even constructed a small laboratory where he continued to gather evidence against Silver Crown Mining's operations in other territories. The trial of Mayor Abernathy and Edwin Gable concluded with convictions for both men. The Silver Crown representatives escaped criminal charges but faced civil penalties that crippled their expansion plans. The new town council, led by Mayor Dawson, passed ordinances protecting the watershed from industrial use, ensuring the town's water supply would remain clean and plentiful. In the spring of 1885, Hazel discovered she was expecting a child. When she told Brent, his face lit with a joy she had never seen before. "A baby," he whispered, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "Our baby. Are you pleased?" She asked, though his expression had already answered her question. "Pleased doesn't begin to describe it," he replied, gathering her into his arms. "I never thought I'd have a family again after my brother died. Never thought I'd find a place where I belonged." "You belong here," she said simply. "With me, with our child. This is your home now." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and fall. On a crisp December morning, with snow dusting the distant mountains, Hazel gave birth to a healthy boy they named Samuel Thomas Riley, Samuel for Hazel's father, Thomas for the creek that had brought them together. As Brent held his son for the first time, staring in wonder at the tiny fingers and the shock of dark hair, he felt the last pieces of his wandering heart settle into place. The quest that had driven him across the West, justice for his brother, accountability for Silver Crown Mining, no longer defined him. Here, in this simple cabin on the Arizona frontier, he had found a purpose greater than vengeance. "He has your eyes," Hazel said softly from the bed, her face tired but radiant. "And your determination," Brent replied, noticing the strong grip of the infant's hand around his finger. "He'll be a fighter, this one." "Like his parents," she agreed. Word of Samuel's birth spread quickly through Jerome Junction. Visitors came bearing gifts, handmade blankets, preserved fruits, wooden toys carved by weather-roughened hands. The same community that had nearly condemned Hazel now celebrated her joy. It was a testament to how much the town had changed and how much Hazel and Brent had become part of its fabric. By Samuel's first birthday, the homestead had transformed further. Brent built a proper windmill to pump water for an expanded garden. They added chickens and goats to their livestock and planted an orchard that would bear fruit in years to come. The laboratory evolved into a workshop where Brent crafted irrigation tools that he sold to other homesteaders. His designs, combining scientific principles with practical application, earned him a reputation throughout the territory. Hazel's skills found new purpose as well. Her knowledge of plants and remedies drew people from neighboring homesteads seeking help for various ailments. What began as neighborly assistance grew into a small apothecary business, with Hazel preparing tinctures and salves from herbs she grew herself. Their success didn't go unnoticed. In the spring of 1887, a representative from the Territorial Agricultural Board visited the Riley homestead to document their innovations. The resulting article in the Arizona Pioneer praised their forward-thinking approach to sustainable farming in arid conditions. That summer, as they celebrated Samuel's second birthday, Hazel shared news of another pregnancy. Brent's joy was no less profound the second time, his kiss conveying all the words he couldn't find. "I never dreamed of this much happiness," he told her later that night as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of amber and rose. Samuel slept peacefully inside, exhausted from his birthday celebrations. Hazel rested her head on his shoulder. "Even after everything that happened when we met, the accusation, the near hanging, the poisonings, especially after all that," Brent replied. "Think about it, if the town hadn't accused you of poisoning the well that day, I might have ridden through without stopping. We might never have met." "I like to think we would have found each other somehow," Hazel said. "Some things are meant to be." Their daughter, Elizabeth Hazel Riley, arrived in the cold of January 1888. Unlike her brother's dark coloring, Elizabeth had her mother's honey-brown hair and her father's piercing blue eyes. Samuel, not quite 3, approached his new sister with solemn curiosity, reaching out to touch her tiny hand with gentle fingers. "Baby," he said, looking up at his parents for confirmation. "My baby." "Your sister," Brent corrected gently. "You'll need to help protect her as she grows." Samuel nodded with all the seriousness a toddler could muster. "Protect," he repeated, the word slightly mangled by his child's pronunciation. Life settled into new rhythms with 2 children. The homestead continued to prosper, and Brent's irrigation designs gained attention beyond Arizona territory. A manufacturing company in California offered to produce them on a larger scale, providing the Rileys with a steady income beyond their farming and Hazel's apothecary. In the summer of 1890, they built a new, larger home on their property, a proper house with 3 bedrooms, a study for Brent's designs, and a special room for Hazel's herbal preparations. The original cabin became a guest house, often occupied by visitors interested in learning their farming techniques. Jerome Junction grew as well. The railroad extended a spur line to the town, bringing new settlers and opportunities. Mayor Dawson, now serving his 3rd term, consulted frequently with Brent on matters of water conservation and land use. The town well that had once been the center of Hazel's nightmare became a symbol of community resilience, with a small plaque commemorating the water rights crisis of 1883 and how it had transformed local governance. Silver Crown Mining eventually went bankrupt after investigations in multiple territories revealed patterns of corruption and environmental damage. Brent received the news with quiet satisfaction, his brother's memory honored by the company's downfall. Justice had come, not through his solitary quest for vengeance, but through persistent truth-telling and the slow wheels of legal accountability. On a warm evening in May 1893, exactly 10 years after they had met at the town well, Brent and Hazel sat on their porch swing, watching Samuel and Elizabeth play with their newest sibling, 4-year-old James, in the yard below. The homestead stretched around them, green fields where once there had been only scrub, fruit trees beginning to bear, a workshop where Brent's newest designs took shape. "You ever think about that day?" Hazel asked, her hand finding his on the swing between them. "The day you rode into town and found me about to be condemned," Brent smiled, the lines at the corners of his eyes deepening, lines earned from years of desert sun and countless smiles. "I think about it more often than you might imagine, how close we came to never having this." His gesture encompassed their home, their children, the life they had built together. "You were so confident when you tested that water," she remembered. "Did you really know it wasn't poisoned, or were you taking a terrible risk?" Brent laughed softly. "Both, I suppose. I'd studied enough chemistry to recognize signs of common poisons. The water looked clean and I trusted my judgment. But yes, there was risk involved." He squeezed her hand. "Some things are worth the risk." Hazel leaned her head against his shoulder, watching as Samuel taught James how to toss a ball while Elizabeth supervised with hands on her small hips. "I'm glad you thought I was worth the risk." "Best decision I ever made," Brent replied simply. "Everything good in my life came from that moment, the moment I looked at a woman accused by her entire community, saw the truth in her eyes, and said the only thing I could say. 'You are blameless,'" Hazel whispered, echoing his words from that fateful day. "And you are everything," he answered, turning to kiss her in the golden light of the setting sun. As twilight deepened over the Arizona desert, the Riley family gathered on their porch, two people who had found each other against impossible odds, and the 3 children who were living proof of their enduring love. The journey that had begun with an accusation and a simple test of well water had led them here, to a life richer and more fulfilling than either could have imagined. In the distance, the lights of Jerome Junction began to twinkle in the gathering darkness. The town that had once nearly taken Hazel's life now stood as their community, transformed by the same truth and justice that had brought Brent and Hazel together. The well at its center no longer symbolized fear and accusation, but served as a reminder that even in the most hostile circumstances, love and integrity could prevail. Brent drew Hazel closer as a cool evening breeze stirred the cottonwoods along the creek. 10 years, he murmured. "And I fall more in love with you each day." "As do I with you," she replied, her voice soft but certain as the stars emerging overhead. "As do I with you." The children's laughter floated up from the yard, a sweet soundtrack to the life they had created together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight was for remembering how it all began, and celebrating the love that had turned a moment of darkness into a lifetime of light.